Ever since I ended up in a wheelchair due to an accident 2 years ago, my husband and mother-in-law's attitudes have become noticeably harsher. Sorry, but could you please leave this house? For a second, I couldn't comprehend the words my husband suddenly uttered one night. What? What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. My mother and I talked it over and decided. Do you mean you want a divorce? Yeah, that's it. I've been thinking about it for a long time now. You can't earn a penny. I don't need you. His words came out like blood from a clenched fist. I understand. Thanks for everything, and lastly, thanks for leaving me with nothing. Leaving those words, I left my seat. The time for them to understand those words will only come a little later. My name is Mary Johnson. After graduating from university, I've been working at my current company for 10 years. Well then, I'll be heading out. Thanks for your hard work. Thanks for your hard work too. I closed my laptop and got up from my seat. Looking at the clock by the window, it was now about 2 hours past overtime. A meeting that came in the afternoon had run late, and as I was preparing for a conference and responding to emails after my regular hours, more time had passed than I expected. I left the office, got in the elevator, and went down to the first floor. Looking out through the automatic glass doors at the building entrance, the sun had already set completely. As I checked the train schedule on my phone while leaving the company gate, I headed to the nearest station. On my way to the station, I saw 2 colleagues from the same department as my husband, Thomas, heading to the same way. I wonder if Thomas is already home. We stopped talking about our work at home recently, so I have no idea if Thomas is busy at work now. More precisely, talking about work at home has been making Thomas noticeably cranky, so the topic naturally fell out of our conversations. As I was swayed by the train on my way home, I gazed absent-mindedly at the scenery reflected in the window. When I was dating Thomas, we often timed our work to finish at the same time so we could go home together, but our schedules have been completely separate for the past year or 2. I noticed a young couple standing near the door. Maybe they're college students, but I heard them having a fun conversation about a movie they saw recently. The happy scene overlapped with my memories from the past. I clenched my eyes shut to hold back the emotions that grew to well up and shut down my field of vision. I'm home. After opening the front door, I called out. While taking off my pumps and looking at the shoes lined up in the entrance, it seemed that everyone else had already returned home. Behind me, the door to the living room opened and the sound of slippers approached. Welcome home, Mary. You were late today. I'm home, mother-in-law. I'll prepare dinner right away. Oh no, you don't have to hurry. You're tired from working overtime, aren't you? No, not really. The meeting in the afternoon ran late, which is why I'm late, but it should settle down soon. As I responded cheerfully, I headed to the living room with my mother-in-law, Edna. After marrying, it had always been Thomas and me, but when his father fell ill and was hospitalized, we moved into his parents' home last year and have been living as a family of 4. Welcome back, Mary. You've had a tough day, haven't you? I'm back, I reply. My father-in-law, who was reading the newspaper on the living room sofa, greets me with a warm voice. Last year, he suffered from a sudden subarachnoid hemorrhage and underwent emergency surgery. While his condition was critical for a time, he's now living without any issues after completing his post-hospitalization rehab. He has a calm demeanor, and I've liked his friendly, easy-to-talk-to personality since the first day we met. Having served as the head of the finance department until his retirement, he's well-versed in financial knowledge and has often given me tips on managing the household budget when I visited. We finished preparing dinner and gather around the table as a family. Anna came over for lunch the other day, and I was surprised at how much her daughter Olivia has grown, Edna comments. They do say kids grow up faster when they're not yours, I respond. Anna is as beautiful as ever, and having a child really brings out her feminine side as a mother, she continues. I guess so, I reply. Anna is Edna's niece and Thomas's cousin. Edna often expresses disappointment that Thomas and I don't have children. She's not too happy about me continuing to work after our marriage. and has hinted that she'd like us to have a child whenever we meet. Honestly, I've always had a hard time dealing with Edna. Especially since we started living together, she tends to bring up this topic, particularly on the days when I come home late from work. You could have had a child if it had been a little earlier, Mary. I suppose it can't be helped because you're busy with work. While I ambiguously nod along, I glance at Thomas, who is quietly eating his meal without looking at me. Thomas and I were colleagues at the same company and got married in our second year of dating. Though we were told that it would be best if I became a housewife if we had a child, we have been working together for 10 years since we got married, and we've yet to have a child. Both of us have longed for a child and have tried everything from herbal medicine to medical tests, but to no avail. While there is a sense of loneliness, we've decided to keep living as a couple and focus on our work. However, at some point, I began to feel an invisible wall between Thomas and I. Even though we married out of love and promised to make each other happy, our relationship has gradually grown cold. I think it started when Thomas began to struggle with his work. He didn't tell me anything, but I heard from a senior colleague in the same department that Thomas was distressed because he couldn't achieve the same results as his peers. Thomas is naturally a gentle person, not good under pressure, and has a habit of pushing himself too hard. I knew without him saying anything that he was feeling anxious and frustrated about the situation. However, whenever I tried to offer him a listening ear, he would stubbornly refuse to share his worries with me, repeating that he was fine and telling me not to worry. Since he continued to keep his worries from me, I couldn't press him further, and I felt helpless that I couldn't be there for him. Even so, on our days off, we'd make it a point to travel together or spend a relaxing day at home, treasuring our time together as a couple. When I became emotionally drained from the ongoing failures in our attempts to conceive, Thomas was there, silently supporting me all the way. That's why, even if I couldn't directly help solve Thomas's current problems, I intended to be by his side, creating moments of comfort and peace for him. The turning point was probably when I received a promotion at work. I was recognized for my achievements on the projects I participated in, and I was even one of the fastest among my peers to get promoted. That's amazing. Congratulations, Mary. I can't forget the expression on Thomas's face when he congratulated me. I was so emotional that I could only manage a simple thank you. As my work became busier, the distance between Thomas and I seemed to only increase. Eventually, we spent less time together, our conversations dwindled, and around the time when my income surpassed Thomas's, we barely even made eye contact. I would look at Thomas's back as he would finish his meal without uttering a word and leave the table. I can't help but wonder, if I hadn't been afraid of rejection back then and had tried harder to support him, could we have built a different relationship than we have now? When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was a bright white light of the fluorescent bulb. After blinking a few times, I started looking around. Apparently, I was lying in a hospital bed. When I looked down at my arm, there was an IV connected and both of my legs were wrapped in numerous layers of bandages and cast. The moment I tried to move, a pain like I'd never felt before shot through my body. Ah! Tears welled up in my eyes from the sheer pain. My body felt as heavy as lead, and it seemed impossible to move. What on earth had happened? I tried to trace back my memories up until the moment I woke up. I remembered going to work at the usual time this morning, finishing up a meeting and report, and leaving work on time for the first time in a while. After leaving the office, I was headed toward the station. Then it hit me. On the way to the station, which was busier than usual due to the rush hour, I remembered hearing the screeching sound of sudden brakes from behind. The moment I turned around, I felt a violent shock. I realized I'd been hit by a car, and at that moment, fear rushed in alongside the pain spreading through my body. What condition is my body in now? The sound of footsteps approached, and suddenly the curtain around my bed was opened. "Oh, Mrs. Johnson, you're awake. But you should not get up yet." A young female nurse called out to me in a rushed manner. "I understand you're confused, but your doctor will explain everything to you shortly. Please, stay calm for now." Okay. After saying that, the nurse left in a hurry. A few minutes later, the doctor arrived and told me about the circumstances of the accident and the surgical procedures. Apparently, a truck that was being driven by a drowsy driver had crashed into the sidewalk, and I was unfortunately there and got knocked over from behind. I had been urgently transported to this hospital immediately after the accident, and it had been about half a day since the surgery. Excuse me, but have you contacted my family already? We have contacted your husband and his parents who live with you to inform them about the accident and that the surgery has been completed successfully. However, they seem to be out somewhere and can't come right away. I see, thank you. Thomas is away on a business trip and his parents have been on an overseas vacation since last week. From the doctor's tone, I could somewhat imagine their reaction when they received the news. Even considering they were out, it didn't seem like the response you'd expect when being told a loved one has been in an accident. At least not to the point where someone else would hesitate to relay their reaction. I laughed bitterly, imagining Thomas's reaction when he found out I was in an accident. It just didn't connect to an image of him being worried about me. From the doctor's subsequent explanation, although there were no life-threatening conditions, the damage to both of my legs was particularly severe. They said the prognosis for walking again is not promising. As I received the explanation, it felt surreal, as if it was about someone else, not my own body. Thomas visited the hospital 3 days after the accident. It was surprising to see his pained expression when he saw me, injured all over, lying in the hospital bed. Sorry, I'm late. It's fine, don't worry about it. I'm sorry for interrupting your business trip. It had been a while since we last talked, and the atmosphere was awkward. Our conversation stalled while we both averted our eyes, and Thomas excused himself to talk to the doctor, leaving the room. I was unable to call out to him and could only watch him leave. It's been 2.5 years since the accident. The disabilities from the accident remain in my legs, and I've been forced into a wheelchair-bound life. The accident happened while I was leaving work, so I was able to stay with the company. But it was difficult to work the same as before, and I resigned about 6 months ago. Since resigning, I've been spending my time at home, but recently a few things have been bothering me. One is that Edna's attitude towards me has become noticeably harsher than before. Mary, do you have a moment? Yes, of course. I'm about to head out, but could you fold the laundry for me? It's just folding, so you can do it even if you can't move your legs, right? Yes, please be careful on your way. Well then, please, get it done. Ever since I started spending my days at home, I've been on the receiving end of more and more snide comments. It seems she's unhappy with her daughter-in-law being at home all day and not working. Now every time we meet, her requests come with a side of sarcasm. I sighed while folding the laundry. The other thing that's been on my mind is Thomas's job. According to a former colleague, Thomas seems to be losing his place at work more than ever before. Outperformed by juniors and subordinates who joined after him, he seems to be treated like an annoyance by his surroundings. He used to mostly keep to himself after coming back from work, but recently he's been taking out his frustrations on me more often. Must be nice, Mary. You don't have to worry about workplace relationships anymore, and you can eat without having to work. I heard from Mom you've been lazing around all day doing nothing. I wish I could have that lifestyle just once. I no longer saw any trace of the once kind Thomas who kept throwing sarcastic remarks at me. All I felt was a sadness for the changed man he had become. I hate to ask this, but could you please leave this house? One night I was at a loss to understand the meaning of the abrupt words that came from Thomas. What do you mean? I mean just what I said. My mom and I have talked it over and decided. I turned to look at Edna, who was sitting next to Thomas. Mary, ever since you quit your job, you haven't contributed to the living expenses, nor have you helped around the house. You've just been staying at home all the time. To be blunt, it's a nuisance if you stay here any longer. Don't you think it's impudent to be leeching off of others without making any contribution to their household? Edna continued, a triumphant look in her eyes. Thomas was silent, without looking at me. Thomas has a tough job, too. Just because you're married, he doesn't have an obligation to support you anymore." I turned my eyes to Thomas, who was looking down. "Thomas is asking me to leave a way of saying that you want a divorce?" "Yeah, that's it. I've been thinking about it for a long time." "So after being together for so long, you have no feelings left for me?" "Why would there be? Of course not." Thomas began to speak as if a dam had broken. "Do you have any idea how miserable I feel every time I see your face? You must have been looking down on me, right? You must have felt superior to me every day, thinking that you were better than me." It felt as though the threads we had spun together since we met were fraying one by one. "I tolerated you because you were contributing to the household expenses, but things have changed. Now you're just a good-for-nothing who neither works nor has money," Thomas said, clenching his fist, spitting out the words as if they were blood. "I don't need you now that you can't earn money." The last thread snapped with a sound. "I understand." For the first time, Thomas looked at me. "But I have a condition. All the procedures for the divorce agreement will be carried out through a lawyer. If you agree to that, I will pack up my things and leave within the week." "Sure, that's fine, isn't it, Thomas?" Thomas silently nodded. "Well then, that's how it is, Thomas." Thomas jolted, looking at me. "Thank you for everything until now. And at last, thank you for leaving me with nothing." With that, I left. A few days had passed since I left the house. When I checked the incoming call on my phone, it was from Thomas. After staring at the screen for a few seconds, I picked up the phone. "Yes, Mary, I'm sorry. Could you please come back?" "What's this all about all of the sudden?" "I heard from my dad. Even after you quit your job, you've been covering our living expenses. You've been investing since you were working, haven't you? And now you're able to cover living expenses with dividend income." "Yes, that's right. So what? I left the household budget to you and my dad, so I didn't know anything. I thought we were living off my income, but we were mostly living off your income, weren't we? I really regret saying such terrible things. I'm sorry." After getting married and merging our finances, I started investing using my own income. Initially, I was encouraged to do so by my father-in-law, and I only consulted him about financial management and investments. "So what am I supposed to do when I come back?" "Well, my dad says with my income alone, it's impossible to maintain the same standard of living as before. Besides, I'm not confident I can continue my current job indefinitely, so what you're saying is please come back so we can live well? You really got some nerve." I could hear Thomas catching his breath over the phone. "The reason I never said anything before is because even though my feelings have changed, I believed that somewhere you still cared about me. But you're not the Thomas I once loved anymore." "That's not true. I still love you, Mary." "There's no need for you to say anything more. All my feelings for you have vanished the last time we talked. Sorry, but whatever happens to you guys from here on out, I just don't care. Thank you for leaving me with no trust, no memories, nothing at all." "Wait, Mary, please, forgive me. I'll handle all the divorce arrangements and proceedings through my lawyer. Don't ever contact me again." After saying just that, I hung up the phone and blocked any further communication. Subsequently, the divorce process proceeded quickly, and I completely severed ties with Thomas. The only person I still communicate with is my father-in-law. "So have you had any trouble living alone since you split up with Thomas?" "No, not particularly so far." "That's good. I'm sorry for the trouble we caused you, Mary. When I heard about what happened from Thomas and my wife, I was so furious I couldn't help shouting. What's more, I shouldn't have turned a blind eye to the terrible attitude my wife and son showed you for such a long time. I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything." "No, it's okay, sir. Please, don't worry about it. In fact, I'm the one who caused trouble." After I left home, troubles at the house seemed to never end. Even after my income was lost, Thomas and Edna continued to live lavishly without reducing their lifestyle, eventually resorting to pawn their belongings and even accumulating debt. Fed up with their irresponsible behavior, my father-in-law recently divorced his wife. I see this as a good opportunity to reassess my life. I can live just fine with my current lifestyle, and I also want to take on new challenges. With that, I laughed cheerfully.
My name is Alice, 28 years old. I work in childcare. Recently, I got engaged to my boyfriend Tom, and I've come to visit his parents' house for the first time. Tom is a graduate of a prestigious university and works for a renowned company. Not only is he smart, but he also has the respect of his colleagues. I've always admired him as a person. His father welcomed our marriage, even saying, "We never had a daughter. Your future mother-in-law will be thrilled." However, I've been bothered by the fact that my future mother-in-law, sitting next to him, seems upset. She's grimacing, almost as if she's angry. While I was observing her, she suddenly asked, "I heard you didn't graduate high school. Is that true? Our Tom is an elite, having graduated from a famous university. You think I'd approve of a marriage between an elite and someone of your status?" I was taken aback when she started to insult me. "Mother-in-law, how can you say such things? You're being rude to Alice." "Exactly, Mom. Your educational background shouldn't matter." Both Tom and his father stood up for me against my future mother-in-law. However, this only seemed to upset my future mother-in-law more. Isn't it natural for a mother to be concerned about the education and occupation of her son's future spouse? Children inherit their mother's DNA, don't they? Don't I want to leave behind excellent genes? It seemed like my mother-in-law wasn't going to approve of me, a high school dropout, because she wanted to ensure the excellence of her offspring. While it's true that some people are obsessed with educational backgrounds, and many parents care deeply about education, it felt sad to be opposed solely because I dropped out of high school. Actually, there was a reason I didn't finish high school. I grew up in a single-parent home after my father died in a traffic accident. My mother was frail, and she had a hard time raising me and my twin sister, Emma. Wanting to alleviate my mother's burden, I started working after middle school. Now, I'm attending night school to get my high school diploma. I'm saving up money, and I can even go to college if I want. Tom is supportive of this, and he even offered to help pay for my college education. Tom understands my home environment, and if I want it, he will pay for my college expenses. Tom is such a kind person, and that's one of the reasons I decided to marry him. But my future mother-in-law seems to dislike this. Tom is an only child, so we will be living with his parents in the future, but I'm a little worried about how that will work out. A while later, I moved into my future in-laws' house. At this point, there was only a month left until our wedding. As the wedding day approached, I had to make more trips to the wedding venue for final checks. I had to make sure to reserve hotels for our guests who would be coming from afar. Between work, school, and wedding preparations, I was very busy. But my mother-in-law didn't seem too pleased with how I was. Today, I was applying makeup to head to the venue, and she suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my, what on earth are you wearing?" My mother-in-law, catching sight of my outfit, had blurted it out loud. "I'm about to head to the venue, so I thought I'd dress up." Whether she was displeased with me dressing up to go to the venue, or just seizing the opportunity to berate me, I couldn't say. "Huh! You say you're going to the venue, but you're just dressing like that to attract men, aren't you? You're such a careless woman." She just decided I was meeting a man instead of going to the venue. I was at a loss for words. I told her I was meeting Tom at the venue, and if she had doubts, she could ask him, but she just assumed I was meeting a man. Then, the next moment, my mother-in-law did something outrageous. She messed up my carefully styled hair. "Hey, what are you doing, mother-in-law? I spent so much time getting ready. This is terrible." With my hair a mess, I couldn't go out and had to fix it. But seeing my disheveled hair, my mother-in-law cheerfully said, "There's no need to fix it. This hairstyle suits a high school dropout, poor woman like you. You should wear your hair like this for the wedding." Since I was already running late, I quickly fixed my hair and headed to the venue where Tom was waiting. Tom was waiting for me at the entrance of the venue and seemed concerned about my downcast expression. I was torn whether to tell him what happened earlier, but I thought it wasn't good to talk about something so depressing when we were about to discuss the ceremony, so I decided not to tell Tom at that time. One day, when it was almost time for the wedding, my mother-in-law suddenly made this suggestion. Hey, Alice's mom lives far away, doesn't she? It must be tough for her to come, and she'll have to pay for her hotel. So why doesn't she stay at our house? Tom and I were both surprised by my mother-in-law's sudden proposal. Indeed, if we could save on hotel costs, my mother would be happy, and it would also facilitate interaction between our families. Tom suggested I ask my mother about mother-in-law's proposal, so I asked her right away. My mother was very pleased with mother-in-law's proposal, and it was decided that my twin sister Emma would also come that day. I initially thought that mother-in-law was making this suggestion out of goodwill, but I could never have imagined the outrageous things she would do next. The day before the wedding, my mother and sister came to stay at my in-laws' house. Seeing my mother and sister, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, made me very happy. I have a particularly close relationship with my sister, and we were so happy to see each other after a long time that we decided to sleep together that night. Emma, who had been drinking, fell asleep right away. No matter what happens, Emma won't wake up once she's like this. Just when I was thinking that, it was getting late and I should get some sleep too. I suddenly felt the door to our room open. As I was wondering what it could be, I heard a loud buzzing sound, followed by the noise of something being shaved. Haha! Now you won't be able to attend tomorrow's ceremony, will you? No need for hair for a poor middle school dropout. The moment I heard that, shocked, I turned on the room lights and said, Mother-in-law, what are you doing? The person in the bed suddenly sat up, startling my mother-in-law as well. Huh? Mother-in-law? You're Alice, aren't you? She seemed to have mistaken me for Emma. That's not my hair. We're twins, and our faces really look alike, but it wasn't me whose hair was shaved with clippers. It was my sister Emma. What? No way. Why? Wasn't it Alice? My mother-in-law seemed to be in shock, but Emma, who had apparently drunk too much, was sound asleep. When she wakes up in the morning and realizes her hair has been shaved off, Emma will surely be very angry. Unlike me, Emma has a strong temperament, so it's obvious she'll be furious. What will you do now, mother-in-law? I'm not going to cover for you. Feeling guilty, perhaps, my mother-in-law left the room with a pale face. The next day, Emma looked in the mirror and was shocked and furious to find that she was bald. Our mother, who was present at the scene, also shed tears in shock, and Tom could not hide his disturbance. It's terrible! Who on earth did this? So I revealed everything that had happened yesterday in front of everyone. I was wondering what kind of face my mother-in-law would wake up with this morning, but she wasn't there. According to my father-in-law, she said she was going for an early morning walk and hadn't returned yet. I thought she had run away, so I revealed everything to our relatives and decided to search for mother-in-law. About 30 minutes later, I got a call from a relative saying they had found her in a nearby convenience store, and my father-in-law headed for that store. My mother-in-law, who had no idea she was being searched for, full of excuses as soon as she came home. I didn't do anything. It's all Alice's fault. Alice used the clippers on her own and cleanly shaved off Emma's hair while she was sleeping next to her. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was trying to pin the blame on me. This shocked me, and I couldn't help but retort. Don't be ridiculous. I didn't do anything. Wasn't it you who came into the room yesterday? It's terrible that you're still lying at this point. But even so, my mother-in-law was reluctant to admit her guilt. Then my father-in-law, as if he had remembered something, went outside and came back with something. Alice, could this be the clipper? Looking at the clipper father-in-law was holding, it was undoubtedly the one mother-in-law used last night to shear off Emma's hair. That's it! That's the clipper! But where was it? It seems this clipper originally belonged to father-in-law, who was always concerned about his appearance and always carried grooming tools with him. When they went to the car, the bag containing his grooming tools was ransacked, and the clipper was the only thing missing. I always leave my car keys in the bedroom. If there's brown hair in this clipper, it's definite that the culprit is your mom. Saying that, father-in-law started to dismantle the clipper. Inside the clipper was brown hair, undoubtedly Emma's. It must have been because she had to rush out in the dark. She couldn't properly dispose of the hair inside. Shown the remaining hair, mother-in-law collapsed to her knees. Alice, it's your fault! Despite being a middle school dropout and poor, you deceived smart Tom. I wanted you to give up on Tom at all costs. I became disgusted at mother-in-law's selfish words. The one who got angriest upon hearing that was Emma, whose hair had been shaven off. I don't care about your circumstances. What are you going to do about this? I can't attend the wedding like this. Hearing Emma's complaint, father-in-law made a call somewhere. His acquaintance, who was a hairdresser, agreed to rush over with a wig right away. This would temporarily solve Emma's hair problem, but they couldn't just leave mother-in-law as is. 30 minutes later, father-in-law's friend arrived with the wig, and Emma's hair was now beautiful. At first, father-in-law thought about shaving mother-in-law's hair just like he did with Emma, but it didn't feel satisfying. So he decided to expose mother-in-law's wrongdoing in front of everyone. Among the attendees called today were landlords who mother-in-law's parents had been indebted to for generations. They seemed to get along with father-in-law, and hearing about this incident would undoubtedly impact mother-in-law's parents' house. This is because the landlord, who was close friends with them, has been giving them a discount on their apartment rent. The landlord is a very righteous person and would surely return the rent to its original price once he learns what mother-in-law has done. Worst case scenario, he might even evict them from the apartment. Mother-in-law's parents are poor and have no money. If they were to be evicted, they would surely come to mother-in-law's place. But I had heard from Tom before that mother-in-law didn't get along with her parents and wouldn't even care for them. Living with her parents would undoubtedly be the beginning of hell for mother-in-law. Wait, please. I'll be in trouble if you do that. I'm sorry. It was my fault. I got carried away and did such a thing. I'm sorry, Emma. I'll pay you damages, so please forgive me. Mother-in-law kept apologizing repeatedly to the point of rubbing her forehead against the floor. But even with apologies, Emma's hair will not come back. After discussion, it was decided that father-in-law and Tom would reveal the wrongdoings of mother-in-law. Of course, Emma has already agreed to this. Mother-in-law said she didn't want to go to the wedding and tried to run away, but she couldn't because Emma and Tom held her back. Upon arrival at the venue, relatives who knew the situation through messages came to us looking very worried. We exposed mother-in-law's wrongdoing in front of the relatives, and Emma took off her wig and showed her bald head. Everyone was shocked by Emma's condition, especially the women, kept saying they couldn't believe it. Hair for a woman is like a lifeline. Imagine the shock of having it suddenly shaved off with a clipper. Thinking of Emma, some people were in tears. Then, as expected, the landlord came to mother-in-law and asked if what happened was true. At first, mother-in-law tried to deceive him, but father-in-law urged her to tell the truth, and she finally confessed. The landlord, flushed with anger, was also accused by the woman. After that, mother-in-law remained downcast during the ceremony, which was unimaginable from her usually spirited self. The wedding itself ended smoothly, and it was a great joy to be blessed by many people. However, we can no longer live with mother-in-law in that house. It's only natural, but we decided to move into an apartment and live as a couple. Mother-in-law was panicked about us leaving the house. She cried out that it was her fault and begged us not to leave, but we can't live with her. But father-in-law felt the same. He told mother-in-law that he was going to divorce her and asked her to leave the house. Mother-in-law turned pale and clung to father-in-law, saying, "Please reconsider. Where will I live if I leave this house? You know, don't you, that I'm not getting along with my parents. If they find out about the divorce, they'll definitely tell me to come back for their care." She was trembling as if she could collapse at any moment. But when I think about Emma, I don't care about mother-in-law. I never dreamed that my hair would be shaved off while I was sleeping and mistaken for me. Mother-in-law persistently tried to persuade us afterwards, but since father-in-law contacted mother-in-law's parents, she reluctantly left the house. Currently, mother-in-law is living with her estranged parents and seems to be taking care of them. But apparently, her parents have a difficult personality, and mother-in-law is being completely worn out by their selfishness. She has called us several times to say she wants to start over, but we have no intention of living with her, so we just blocked her calls. Now, we are living happily with father-in-law in his home. The house was quite old, so we decided to renovate it together. Father-in-law built his dream study. Tom created a place to display model figures, and I decided to install a state-of-the-art kitchen. Of course, we also created a room for the child who will be born in the future, and now the three of us are living comfortably. Emma's hair, which was shaved at that time, has now become short, and it seems to be highly rated by her friends as a good change of image. She talks about that time as if it were a joke, telling various friends, and it actually complicates my feelings more. Emma, for her part, occasionally comes over for sleepovers at our family home, and I look forward to that. There may be many difficulties in the future, but I believe we can all work together and push through.
My husband Robert and I were high school classmates. Our relationship started during our sophomore year school trip. I had a dream to become a doctor. At the same time, Robert had his own dream. He wanted to be a lawyer. We each pursued our dreams and enrolled in our respective universities. It seemed like everything was going smoothly, but Robert failed the bar exam 5 years in a row. After that, Robert started working in sales at a general corporation. On the other hand, I was able to become an obstetrician after 6 years of university and 2 years of residency.
Congrats on becoming a doctor and achieving your dream, Amy.
Robert rejoiced over my accomplishment as if it were his own. Thank you. I think things are going to get even busier from now on. I'm sorry if I have to cancel our dates more often than before. I had been called in for some emergencies several times during my residency. As a full-fledged doctor, I would have to work with more responsibility, especially in obstetrics. We can't schedule a baby's delivery date. We have to be ready 24/7, 365 days a year, whenever the baby decides to be delivered. There would be no time for dates or anything like that. Feeling guilty, I apologized to Robert. He replied,
So, why don't we just get married?
Huh? Get married?
Yeah, that way we can always be together. You can go to work whenever you need to. If we have a child, and you suddenly have to go to work, I'll support you.
Surprised by the sudden proposal, I felt comforted by his reassuring words. I remember tearfully saying, Thank you. I appreciate it. OBGYN is the only field that deals with the birth of life. Of course, we also treat diseases, but there's a joy in this field that can't be found anywhere else. It's a job I could call my calling. I'm currently 35 years old. I've been working as an OBGYN for 9 years now. I've witnessed many births and delivered many babies. However, Robert and I have been married for 7 years, and we don't have any children. We both love kids, and Robert was eager to have many when we first got married, saying,
I want a lot of kids. I'll work hard.
But that enthusiasm has faded over time. I thought that having children was a blessing, and there was nothing we could do about it, but that no longer seemed to matter. Recently, we hardly ever go out together on our days off. Robert seems to be busy with something in his room all the time. He has put a lock on his room and always locks it when he is inside. We used to sleep together in the same bedroom when we first got married, but because of my work, I sometimes had to leave the house in the middle of the night, so we decided to sleep in separate rooms to avoid disturbing Robert. Also, when I work late or night shifts and I'm not home, Robert also comes home late. I know this because we have a dog at home. We've installed a pet cam in the living room where the dog's kennel is, so we can always watch our pet. The camera is set to send a notification to our phones when someone comes home, so I always know when Robert gets back. Of course, Robert knows about this camera, and we can both view it from our phones. One day, I received a notification on my phone at an unusual time. It was on a day when I was working a night shift, but it seemed like Robert had returned home at the usual time. Normally, I wouldn't mind, but the sound of that notification felt odd. Since I was on break, I immediately checked my phone. On it was a video of my husband and a woman's legs in a skirt. "What's this?" I inadvertently exclaimed aloud in the break room. The other nurses around me asked what was wrong, but I replied with a feigned smile, saying it was nothing. After that, the notifications of Robert getting home at the usual time hit more often on the days I worked night shifts. However, whenever I checked, only the woman's feet were visible. Even if I confronted him about it, I thought Robert would play dumb. So I marked the days I was on and off duty on our calendar at home. Then, on that day, I decided to wait for Robert to come home with someone. That person was my younger brother. In fact, I left my dog at my brother's place since the day after I found out about a woman coming over to my place. I felt guilty about leaving the dog alone in a house where I didn't know when Robert would bring the woman again. I waited in my brother's car for 30 minutes. Robert returned home right on time. There was a woman walking with him, her arm linked with his. Seeing this, I thought I would lose my composure, but maybe because my much younger brother was next to me, I strangely kept my cool. I immediately started recording a video with my phone.
My brother-in-law is bold. Doesn't he worry about being seen by the neighbors?
My brother said after I finished filming the two who had comfortably walked into the entrance. Yeah, there must be neighbors watching.
It would be strange if there weren't people watching at this time.
I found myself agreeing. Looking around, it seemed it was during the rush hour when neighbors were returning home. I hadn't noticed because I worked on an irregular schedule, but I just realized that this is the general time when people return home. That night, I stayed at my brother's house, playing with my beloved dog, and then sleeping. The next day, I decided to visit a neighbor with whom I am particularly close to, and asked about Robert and the woman. It seems the neighbor also found it suspicious and had asked about it. He had apparently answered that she was his sister. The neighbors believed him, since they knew that I also had a brother who was much younger than me. Now that I also had testimony from my neighbor, I was thinking about when to propose a divorce to Robert, when one morning a familiar face appeared in the consultation room. "Thank you in advance." The woman who entered with a worried voice was none other than, I believe, Robert's mistress. I was about to make a strange sound, but I held it back. I switched into work mode and said, "Congratulations! You're 8 weeks pregnant." "Really? I'm so happy. Doctor, is the baby a girl or a boy?" "We can't tell the gender yet, but everything's going well for now." "I see. I wish I could find out soon. He wants a girl." She was tenderly rubbing her belly, and even though I hadn't asked, she continued, "I'm not married yet, but I'm thinking of getting him to marry me now that I'm pregnant." "Is that so?" I replied in a way that wouldn't upset her. "Actually, he's only been divorced for 2 months. They say you can't remarry until 100 days have passed." "Really? Is the father of your baby your boyfriend? At the hospital today?" "Yes, he's waiting for me in the car." She answered with joy. I told her that I'd like to discuss the future with him too, so she went out to call him in with a smile. 15 minutes later, after attending other patients in between, I called her back. Then, as expected, Robert walked in from behind her. Robert blurted,
"Excuse me."
when he caught sight of my professional smile.
"What? Huh? Why is Amy here?"
Saying that, he looked at the nameplate on the office wall and muttered,
"No way."
"I work under my husband's surname, not my maiden name. Many female doctors continue to use their maiden names, but in my case, my maiden name was quite rare and difficult to pronounce. However, Robert's last name is the most common surname in the States, so he probably didn't pay much attention to it. At the hospital where I work, there happen to be no doctors with the same last name in the same department, so I only used my last name on the nameplate." Seeing Robert's disturbed look, the woman looked puzzled. "Amy, that's me, right? We came in together. Of course I'm here." I was stunned by her words. His lover's name is Amelia. Certainly she is Amy. However, calling your wife and mistress by the same nickname is beyond despicable. Being cornered by his mistress, Robert stammered.
No, this is a bit...
So I decided to explain for her. Amelia, my name is Jamie. I'm also Amy.
What? Bobby, you've been cheating?
Bobby? I nearly burst out laughing at the reality of a 35-year-old man being called Bobby. Huh, I see you have her call you Bobby. Did you tell her where I work?
No. I forgot that you worked here.
Robert was taken aback. It seemed he either didn't care or never asked about where I worked. Despite that, his mistress was confronting him.
Bobby, who's this woman? No.
Robert was unable to explain. Well, that's not surprising, considering that, according to the story I just heard from his mistress, Robert has been divorced from me for the last 2 months. Faced with Robert's silence, I decided to confront the mistress with reality. Amelia, I am Robert's wife.
What? Robert, so you lied about getting a divorce to marry me?
That's when Robert spoke up.
That's not it. For now, just be quiet, Amy.
What are you talking about? We need to clarify this. You've been deceiving me, haven't you?
I said be quiet.
Robert seemed very flustered. Well, of course he would be. No one could remain calm while being accused by their mistress in front of their wife. When did you start seeing Robert?
About a year ago.
Unlike Robert, the mistress answered my question honestly. I see. So, you were aware that Robert was married when you started the relationship, correct?
But Bobby said that his wife was constantly cheating and their marriage was already in ruins.
Regardless, having a relationship while knowing he's married, your act is subject to compensation. I responded with a smile on my face.
But he's already divorced, right? We're not divorced.
At this point, Robert tried to silence the mistress once again. However, this sparked an argument in the examination room. Several nurses noticed the argument and came into the room. Since this could interrupt subsequent consultations, I called for security to escort the two out. That night, I decided to have a discussion with the two of them at a coffee shop. I thought about some strategies and called my brother during lunch to explain the situation and ask him to join the discussion at night. After hearing the whole story, my brother asked,
I know it's a weird question, but why did you guys not have any kids?
Upon hearing that, I exclaimed, That's it. Thank you, little brother, and embraced my brother in a childish way, ruffling his hair. This would certainly be another blow to Robert.
Stop it!
My brother pushed me away, but left me with some supportive words.
Let me know if there's anything I can help with.
I'm not afraid of anything anymore. From here on out, I'm going to hit them with the most severe punishment. That night, as my brother and I waited for them at the coffee shop, they appeared, and the first thing they said was,
You're also having an affair, aren't you?
At these words, my brother spoke up.
Long time no see, brother-in-law. How have you been? Huh? Brother-in-law? You don't mean? Yes, I was just a teenager when you two got married.
My brother and I are 9 years apart. He's grown quite mature over the past 7 years, so I guess it's understandable that he didn't recognize him. Furthermore, my brother added,
I'm here today as a witness, so please keep that in mind.
Fixing Robert and his lover with a sharp gaze.
Huh? A witness?
Robert looked shocked. In fact, my brother had become a lawyer. Moreover, a lawyer who specializes in divorce cases. He knew about Robert's multiple bar exam failures and had been considerate not to mention it. More importantly, let's continue our conversation from earlier. Here, I brought this. I presented an envelope. Inside was a divorce paper, with my part already filled out. Fill this out. Right now.
What a considerate woman, bringing the papers herself.
Robert retorted, now looking rather smug, and quickly filled out the papers. Robert's lover, seemingly excited, said, Now, after 100 days, I can officially be Mrs. CEO. However, I immediately asked her, Mrs. CEO? What are you talking about?
Robert said he's the CEO of a top-tier company.
Robert's eyes started darting around.
Yeah, that's right.
I couldn't stop laughing. Seeing me doubled over in laughter, Robert's lover looked perplexed.
What's so funny?
Oh, I'm sorry. Who did you say is a CEO? Robert's just an ordinary office worker. And the house? It's under my name. Also, there's no waiting period for men to get remarried after getting a divorce. Upon hearing this, Robert's lover was livid.
What? Robert, how many times were you gonna deceive me? I've had enough. I thought you loved me. Well, I thought you were rich and had a big house. Otherwise, why would I fall for an old man like you?
Seeing the two bicker, my brother and I couldn't help but crack a smile. Now it's time to send my husband further into the abyss. I swiftly handed Robert some documents.
What's this now?
Robert took it bluntly, tearing open the envelope. Upon seeing the contents, his face turned as pale as a sheet.
What is this?
Do you remember when we had trouble conceiving and had ourselves checked? This is the result from back then. I didn't mention it because I knew you had some ego.
Is this mine?
Yes. It seems you can't have children. So who's the father of the child inside her, I wonder? I presented him with the test results we had done years ago. According to the results, Robert was infertile. I had not mentioned it to him since I'd come to realize that even without children, we could still be happy together. Upon hearing the news, the other woman didn't consider her surroundings and began to make a scene.
I didn't know. I didn't know you were infertile. Wait, so it's not my kid? Maybe the test results are fake.
Robert's lover hit and snapped at him.
If you're seedless, it's someone else's. I didn't know who the father was, so I was planning to marry you because you earned the most.
Hearing that, both my brother and I were left speechless. The two of them kept arguing, so we tried to calm them down, worried they disturbed the other customers. But they were unstoppable. My brother, as a lawyer, began to explain to them. He said I would be demanding compensation from both Robert and his mistress. The two of them cried.
We don't have any money.
But that wasn't my problem. My brother told them if they continued to complain, he'd take them to court, and they finally agreed to pay. The next day, I quickly submitted the divorce papers and kicked Robert out of my house. After that, Robert, who was incapable of doing any housework, couldn't live alone, and was disowned by his parents, and ended up marrying his mistress, Amelia. Moreover, he desperately wanted a child, and decided to raise the unborn child as his own, although they didn't know who the father was. Amelia probably figured it would be cheaper to raise the child together and share the burden of the compensation than to pay it on her own. Robert started working like a mule to pay the compensation for both of them. Once Amelia gave birth, she planned to put the baby in daycare and get a part-time job. Meanwhile, I sold my house and stayed with my brother until I found a new place. As I was preparing to move into my new house, my brother asked me not to leave, but I brushed it off saying, "You'll never get a girlfriend if I'm around." Of course, I took the dog, and we are now living together in our new home. Moving forward, I plan to continue working and being involved in bringing many more lives into the world.
I realized I had been deceived during the first New Year's after marrying my husband, James. While helping with the holiday meal in the kitchen, my sister-in-law Emily made a snide comment. "Susan, are you bad at cooking? Make the presentation nicer. It's killing my appetite." I am no culinary genius, that's for sure. I struggle with presentations, but I was doing my best. Still, I thought it was unnecessary for her to call me out like that, especially with other female relatives around. I'm sorry. I usually don't pay much attention to that. I would appreciate some guidance. Just as I sincerely asked for help, my mother-in-law Tiffany interrupts and says to me, "Plating food is basic, right? Especially when it's James' favorite dish. You've never cooked it at home, so you don't have a sense of how to plate it, do you?" Poor James. He married a wife who can't even cook properly. There is a reason you have been divorced before, you know. Did your ex-husband cheat on you because he got tired of your bad cooking and careless personality? Tiffany and Emily took turns making these comments and finally walked away looking annoyed. They complained but never actually helped. Instead, another female relative stepped in to assist me. What surprised me more than being criticized for my lack of cooking skills was the drastic change in their attitude towards me. 6 months ago, I remarried. After divorcing my cheating ex-husband 2 years ago, I met James, who is younger than me. We hit it off and quickly started talking about marriage. Both James and I love spending time outdoors, so we went fishing and camping together. We decided to get married. James is active but kind, and I felt comfortable around him. I was worried whether his family would accept me, a divorcee. But when I visited his family home, they welcomed me warmly, and my worries vanished. It's nice to meet you, Susan. If you're okay with our son, please marry him. Good for you, James. You found a kind wife. I had some interactions with my previous husband's family, but we never got close. They were wealthy and formal, and I, being an ordinary person, couldn't fully understand their values. So I was honestly worried about getting along with this new family. But I thought everything would be fine since they welcomed me warmly. That sense of security must have been fake. Throughout my stay, Tiffany and Emily kept bad-mouthing me. I was shocked by their change in attitude. On the night of January 3rd, I finally returned home and felt relieved to the point of tears. Then, in August, during the summer vacation, my husband suggested going back to his family home, but now my anger and sadness had faded, and I thought maybe they were just stressed out at that time. It's not very popular to drag on and complain about the past few days. I was still a bit scared of Tiffany and Emily, but I thought I could manage for a few days. So I decided to accompany my husband back to his family home. Let's buy lots of gifts to make them happy. If I bring gifts, we'll surely have a pleasant conversation. I thought that the New Year's incident was just a bad dream. I kept thinking that until we arrive at my in-laws' home, which is in a coastal town in the neighboring state. We drove half the day, and due to traffic, we arrived in the evening. Welcome home, James. Susan. Tiffany smiled warmly, happy to see her son after a long time. She also gave me a kind smile. Emily, standing next to Tiffany, accepted the gifts and thanked me with a smile. I felt relieved. I was right. That day, they were just in a bad mood. James, Dad and the uncles are at their usual bar. Why don't you join them? They all seem to want to see you.
Really? Hey, Susan, want to come along?
James asked me gently. I was planning to go, but Tiffany stopped me. Oh, we were planning to have a girls-only time. Thought Susan might enjoy that more. If that's the case, go ahead, James. Have fun. James looked like he wanted to say something, but eventually left alone saying,
if Susan is okay with it.
After seeing off James, I tidied up a bit and headed to the living room for the girls-only time that Tiffany mentioned. Tiffany, since it's girls-only, is there something I should do? When I asked Tiffany, she happily replied, I was thinking of making some tea. Could you pick some herbs from the garden? The ones with white flowers? Oh, Susan, while you're at it, could you feed the dog? They have a large dog at their home. The dog is gentle and has taken a liking to me, which is adorable. I have always wanted a dog, but couldn't afford one as a child. So I was genuinely happy to take care of the dog. Sure, I'll head to the garden. I took a bowl for the herbs and a plate for the dog food, put on my sandals, and went out to the garden. Immediately after, I heard the sound of a log. I turned around in a panic. Tiffany and Emily were watching me through the window smirking. That's when I realized I had been tricked by Tiffany and Emily again. They had intentionally given me a task outside. They even sent James away and kept me here under the guise of a girls-only time, all to lock me out? Tiffany and Emily are terrible people who take pleasures in such childish malice. They ridiculed me for being a divorcee and bad at cooking during New Year's, but that was just talk. This time, they actually locked me out. Come on, this is a joke, right? Let me in. I knocked on the window, but Tiffany and Emily didn't even touch it. A woman like you, raised by a single parent and bad at housework, doesn't belong in our home. We don't need to feed you or give you a place to sleep. If you still want to stay, why not sleep in the doghouse? It's a large doghouse. They're suggesting that someone as petite as me could fit in there? Hilarious, Susan. You've become a dog. Emily clapped her hands and laughed. This is cruel. Stop it, please. But they just laughed and didn't lock the door. I wondered how to get back inside but realized that even if they let me in, they would probably continue to mistreat me. Then it hit me. My car keys were still in my pocket. If I can't go inside the house or join my husband, I can just kill time outside, I thought. I took something out of the car and quickly set it up. Tiffany and Emily, surprised by the noise outside, opened the curtains to see what was going on.
What on earth is she doing?
Tiffany covered her mouth in astonishment. And for good reason. What I had taken out of the car and set up was a tent we used on last week's camping trip. They probably never expected me to opt for outdoor comfort.
Stop it, you are ruining the lawn. You are so rude. You are never setting foot in this house again.
Ignoring Tiffany and Emily, I decided to make myself some hot coffee on a small camping stove I had left in the car. Even though it's summer, it had been cloudy all day and it got quite chilly as night fell. It's a season for iced coffee, but hot coffee felt more satisfying. Before I knew it, the family dog who had come out of the doghouse came over to warm up by the fire. Sorry for the noise. Oh, right. I was supposed to feed you, wasn't I? Here you go. I put the plate of dog food I had left on the ground in front of him, and he started eating with gusto. When I petted him, he let out a happy little bark. I thought I had no allies in this house, but with this big, gentle dog here, I knew I would be okay until my husband returned. But my husband had left in the evening. If he's drinking, he won't be back for a while. Let's go into the tent. You can come too. I lay down in the tent with the dog. I petted the dog sitting next to me and noticed that despite his fluffy fur, he was quite thin. It must have been a long time since he had been petted, as he was snorting happily. Maybe this dog doesn't get much attention? Is this the first time he's been petted in a while? He seemed really happy. I started to worry more about this dog than about myself. Shall we go find them? No point staying here. The dog probably didn't understand my words, but when I spoke, he barked and seemed to nudge me forward. I folded up the tent, got in the car with the dog, and drove into town. I parked the car in a random lot and walked around the town with the dog. There are so many bars, it's hard to tell, I said to the dog as we walked, but he led the way. However, I heard familiar voices coming from a bar in the direction the dog was heading. It was my father-in-law Thomas and James. The dog must have led me here by recognizing their scents or voices. Sure enough, when I entered the bar, my husband looked surprised.
Susan, what are you doing here? And you brought the dog?
I felt a sense of relief at finally seeing another human, but there was something else I needed to address. Is this place pet-friendly? Can the dog and I come in? The bar's policy was against it, but Thomas and his relatives were regulars, so they made an exception.
Susan, it must have been cold outside. Here, have a drink.
I took a sip from the glass that was handed to me. Delicious, not just the drink, but the kindness of my husband's relatives, who were meeting me for the first time, warmed my heart. I kept drinking as they encouraged me to have another glass and another, and soon I felt the alcohol taking effect. When you're tipsy, you start to say things you have been holding back. Tiffany and Emily locked us out, so we had no choice but to come here, I said. I couldn't stop talking about what happened today and on New Year's. I might be judged for it. If I were sober, I might have worried about that. But I was drunk and didn't care, and everyone, including my husband and Thomas, listened intently. After I finished speaking, one of the relatives said, "Again?
Those two are at it again?"
That triggered a flood of stories about Tiffany and Emily.
They did the same thing when they were supposed to be taking care of James's grandmother. She eventually moved into a nursing home because she couldn't take it anymore. And it's not just that. They don't even take care of that dog. They leave it all to their husbands.
When the uncle said that, Thomas finally spoke up.
I thought about divorcing them when they mistreated my mother, but what they did to you, my son's wife, is unforgivable. I can't take it anymore.
Thomas stood up. When we returned home, Thomas finally confronted Tiffany and Emily.
Let's get a divorce. Leave now.
But Tiffany and Emily fought back.
Susan is also to blame. She set up a tent and even took the dog into town. That's so unreasonable.
I don't see it that way. Kicking someone out into the cold is what's unreasonable. What do you think family is? I wanted to get along with you, but I have reached my limit. I don't want to consider people like you as family. Tiffany and Emily glared at me, but then they screamed. The dog had growled at them. Thomas spoke as if he were looking at something pathetic.
You never took care of that dog. You didn't feed him or walk him. You're not even worthy of being his owner. It serves you right to be growled at. You're not part of this family. Leave now.
Thomas made them pack their bags and kick them out regardless of the time. Tiffany and Emily left without arguing, probably because Thomas was so intimidating. They didn't have much in terms of assets, so they ended up living in a small apartment to save money. But they were spendthrifts to begin with, so they soon ran into financial difficulties. Not only does Tiffany have to worry about everyday expenses, but she also has to pay alimony. She's probably struggling with Emily, both of them working hard at jobs they're not used to. As for me, with Tiffany and Emily gone, my husband and I decided to move in with Thomas so he wouldn't be lonely. Changing jobs was a concern, but I found a new one sooner than expected, so that was a relief. Since moving, life has been joyful every day with kind-hearted Thomas, my loving husband, and our pet dog, who's become like a friend to me. Relatives also started visiting more often. Surrounded by lively people who love alcohol, learning about various delicious drinks and enjoying conversation over drinks has become one of my hobbies.
My name is Sherry. It's almost been 5 years since I married my husband Adolf. We both work, and while we're generally busy, we lead fulfilling lives. I have a father and a younger brother. My mother passed away due to an illness 2 years ago, and since then, my father, Jacob, has been living alone. When my mother passed away, I was worried about him. I talked to Adolf and expressed, I'm concerned about my father. I'd like to live closer to my childhood home. With that, Adolf and I decided to move closer to my family home after my mother's passing. We could have moved in with Jacob, but he declined our offer. When I suggested, Dad, I worry about you living alone. Let's live together, he replied. You're as strict as your mother, and I want some freedom in my life. That certainly put me in my place. I do tend to nag like my mother, and I've reprimanded Jacob for never doing any housework and always relying on my mother. I guess he thought it would be a hassle and wouldn't get any peace living with me. I was still worried about Jacob, but I didn't think it necessary to force him to live with us if he was against it, so we ended up just moving close to my childhood home. I'd visit and cook meals for him regularly, and we would engage in trivial chats. I thought this level of distance was just right. Then, a year ago, my brother Leon got married. Before his marriage, he was living alone, so we didn't get much chance to interact, but I was still overjoyed when I heard about his engagement. Leon's wife, Kira, is a lovely person, and initially I was delighted to have such a sweet sister-in-law. However, the moment Leon's wedding was confirmed, Jacob suddenly suggested, "Why don't you two live with me after the wedding?" Despite him refusing my proposal earlier, even though I was taken aback, I knew Jacob adored Leon, so his suggestion wasn't surprising. Indeed, Kira was much kinder to Jacob, very different from me. Jacob would repeatedly mention how sociable and adorable Kira was, but the person who was not particularly thrilled with this was Kira herself. Of course, she didn't openly express her discomfort in front of Jacob, but when they got home, she apparently said to Leon, "I'm not too keen on living with your father. I'd rather live with my mother." Leon wasn't too thrilled about living together either, given that they had just gotten married, so the idea of them moving in with Jacob was eventually dismissed. A few months after that, when I visited my family home for the first time in a while, I noticed something odd about Jacob. Jacob, who usually has breakfast at 7 a.m. and lunch at noon, was eating his meal around 10 a.m. when I arrived. "Dad, are you having a late breakfast today or an early lunch?" When I asked him, he said it was breakfast. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I casually went to the kitchen to clean the house, I noticed dishes that had been used for breakfast left in the sink. Jacob always did the dishes before bed, so these dishes couldn't have been from last night. They were from this morning. Feeling something was off, I asked Jacob again, "Father, the dishes are in the sink. Didn't you have your breakfast?" At that, Jacob suddenly slammed the table and stood up and shouted, "What, are you trying to say that I'm losing it?" Saying so, he turned beet red and got mad at me. Sure, Jacob was hot-tempered, but I'd never seen him this unreasonable before, so I was stunned. Then, as quick as a flash, Jacob's face relaxed. "I gotta fix breakfast," he said, picking up the dishes we'd just finished eating off of and headed for the kitchen. I thought it was definitely strange, so I suggested Jacob go to the hospital. However, he stubbornly refused. What's more, he begged me, tears welling up in his eyes. "Don't tell Leon and the others, please," he pleaded. I suppose Jacob felt something was off about himself. Not wanting to worry his beloved son and daughter-in-law, he strongly resisted sharing his symptoms with Leon and the others. I consulted Adolf many times, but in the end, we decided it was best to respect Jacob's wishes, so I never told Leon and his family about Jacob's cognitive issues. Despite our concerns, we suggested to Jacob several times that we should live together. However, Jacob didn't change his mind, insisting if I were to live with anyone, it'd be Leon and his family. That was all he would say. We would have loved to have lived with Leon and his family, but we couldn't ask them to do so without telling them about Jacob's condition. Adolf and I were at our wits' end. But about 2 months later, I got a phone call from Jacob at his home. He said cheerfully, "I've got something to tell you. Come over." Since Adolf had to work that day, I went over to his home alone. There, Jacob was with, surprisingly, Leon. "What's up? And why is Leon here?" When I asked that, Jacob answered with a broad smile. "Actually, I've decided to tear down this house and build a new one." "Wait, build a house?" When I asked again, Jacob nodded excitedly and said with a grin, "And it's going to be a 2-family house." "2-family? Why all of a sudden? Are you saying Leon and his family will live with you?" When I asked, Leon nodded. Thinking it's not exactly living together if it's a 2-family house, I grabbed Leon's arm, took him to the corner of the room and asked quietly, "Hey, didn't your wife say she didn't want to live with you guys? And that she'd rather live with her own mother if possible?" "Oh, no worries there. After all, the one who suggested building this 2-family house was Kira." "What, really?" I'd always thought that Kira was against living with Jacob, so I never imagined that she was the one who planned this 2-family house project. Jacob showed me the floor plan, boasting to me, "Isn't it great?" More than that, I was unable to decipher Kira's intentions and was a bit worried. "Hey, did Kira really say okay? You guys aren't just pushing this on her, are you?" When I checked, both Jacob and Leon laughed. No, it was really her idea. She's worried about Dad." "You really got yourself a good wife, Leon. Unlike Sherry, Kira is adorable. You're a lucky guy." Saying so, they laughed out loud. Both Jacob and Leon insisted Kira suggested it. Kira proposed we live together because she's worried about Dad. They were happy saying this, but I had a hunch. I just couldn't believe that Kira proposed this duplex idea purely out of goodwill. A few days later, I was called back to my family home to discuss the floor plans. Upon arriving, I found Kira was there too, and I decided to press her a bit. "Hey, Kira, are you really okay with this? Living together, I mean. You never seemed too keen on the idea." Upon hearing this, Kira smiled broadly and said, "Of course, I'm worried about my father-in-law, and as a daughter-in-law, I feel it's my duty to help as much as I can." She punctuated her statement with a power pose. arms flung out confidently. Watching her, Leon chimed in. Sis, you worry too much. Or are you perhaps jealous of us moving into a brand new house? Ha! His comment was somewhat jarring. That's not it, I'm just concerned about potential arguments down the line. Upon hearing that, Jacob, trying to tease me, said, Don't lie. You just want to live with us too, right? Sorry, but no way. Just show me the floor plans already. I'll look and leave. I sighed. While we were in the midst of this back and forth, Kira's phone rang. I'm sorry, it's my mom. I'll take this outside, she said and left the room. Jacob and Leon showed me the floor plan, bragging about this room and that detail for what felt like an eternity. Yet something about the floor plan nagged at me. Hey, what's this big room for? Was it there when you showed me last time? When I asked that, Leon began to explain. Oh, that? Kira requested that room, Leon began. She said we could use it freely and it could serve as a guest room when someone comes over. Jacob chimed in, seemingly impressed. Kira really thinks of everything, huh? What a good kid. But something about that room didn't sit right with me. It was about twice as big as any other room. A guest room, isn't it a bit too large? It's the biggest room in the whole plan. At my question, Leon and Jacob gave troubled looks. Well, Kira really insisted on this room. If Kira wants it that way, then it's fine. You shouldn't interfere, they concluded. Feeling rather annoyed at this point, I decided to head home. I'm leaving, I announced and stepped out of the room. As I did, I heard Kira's voice. She was still on her call, her voice just audible. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help but overhear her conversation. Yeah, it's fine, Mom. I've made sure to create your room. Don't worry, they'll do as I say. Once you start living with us, I'll kick out the old man. She was telling her mother, clearly. I turned unconsciously toward her voice and our eyes met. Kira quickly ended her call. Oh, sister-in-law, are you leaving already? Do visit us once the house is ready. Kira smiled at me, so I asked her, Is what you just said true? Kira's eyes widened for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. What do you mean? I'm going back to my room. With that, she left. Something was definitely off. I decided the best thing to do was to go home and talk to Adolf. A few days later, Adolf and I headed to my in-laws' home. Of course, we had asked my brother-in-law and his wife to be there in advance. Sherry, you've called us all here. What's this about? Jacob asked, to which I answered straight to the point. Building a duplex house is a mistake. Kira will take it over and it'll be the end of it. My words left Jacob and Leon speechless. How can you say such a horrible thing? Kira pretended to cry, exclaiming. Seeing her reaction, Leon and Jacob glared at me. What's wrong with you? Why would you say such a thing? You just don't want us to live together, do you? Just leave. They yelled back at me. Just listen to me, Leon and Dad, you are being deceived. Despite my serious plea, both Jacob and Leon refused to listen. You're the worst. We've been wrong about you, they shot back. At that moment, something snapped inside me. I slapped the table and spoke clearly to Leon and Jacob. Do you know that woman planned to bring in her mother after the duplex is built and kick Dad out, and you still want to build it? With that, Kira shuddered. Leon and Jacob, taken aback by the truth, muttered, No, it can't be true. Kira, you were worried about me and wanted to live together. They started mumbling. Kira, sensing trouble, quickly replied, Of course, it's all for you, Father. My mom has nothing to do with it. She tried to dodge the situation, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I had no choice but to reveal the truth to her. Okay, Kira, if you insist, but if you really want to build, buy the land of this house from me first. What? Kira was puzzled. You see, the land where this family home is built was originally my mother's, and I got it in exchange for helping Leon, who was in a financial crisis at the time. I'm not going to let you use this land for your selfish purposes. If you really want to do it, I'll sell it to you at double the price. If you're really worried about Jacob and want to live together, you can afford that much, right?" With that, Kira fell silent. Jacob shouted, "Then I'll pay. Isn't that enough?" That's when Adolf, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Dad, Leon, I hate to say this, but even if Sherry is hated by both of you, she's trying to protect you. If things go Kira's way and her mom moves in and Dad gets kicked out, Leon, can you take responsibility?" Adolf's calm and steady statement was strikingly credible, and both Jacob and Leon were stunned into silence. Seeing this, Kira, unable to stand it any longer, started to make a fuss. "Leon, you don't believe them, do you?" She started arguing. Kira directly addressed me. "Stop making absurd accusations. I'm not planning on letting my mom live here." So I asked Leon, "Leon, can I borrow your mobile phone? I've got this." "Huh?" "Just trust me. I'll call Kira's mom and see what's going on." Upon hearing that, Kira turned pale and yelled, "No, stop!" "Is there something you're worried about?" When I asked her, Kira glared at me and said, "Enough! There's no way I'd live with a bothersome father-in-law like you. I only thought of living together because you offered to pay for a nice duplex for Mom and me. Sorry for that." With that, she stormed out of the house. Leon hurriedly chased after her, leaving a stunned Jacob behind. Later, he said, "I guess I'm being punished for bad-mouthing you, my own daughter." Jacob, who made the comment with a smile, looked somewhat lonely. In the end, Leon followed Kira. Now he's renting a spacious condo and living with Kira and her mother. It seems Kira and her mother hold all the power. It's pitiful, especially considering he's my own brother. On the other hand, Jacob came to apologize to me. "I'm sorry for all the selfish things I said. I owe you, Sherry." I then shared with Jacob what Adolf and I had been considering. "Dad, why don't you live with us? We're thinking of buying our own home." At that, Jacob nodded with an apologetic look. Since then, he's been cooperative whenever I suggest going to the hospital. Although he was diagnosed with dementia, he takes his medicine without complaint. This has slowed the progression, and we're managing to live together. Jacob has been saying thank you to me more often since then. I think he feels guilty about refusing to live with me in the past, but to me, it doesn't matter anymore. He's my father, we're blood, and he means a lot to me. Adolf has also been supportive of Jacob, and I'm nothing but grateful. From now on, I plan to cherish each day in hopes of spending as much time as possible with Jacob.
I really don't want you at the wedding. I don't want to associate with someone like you who'd resort to illegal means just to be popular with the opposite sex. I wish he'd cut ties with you. You're not fit to be his sister. What are you talking about? Before I could respond, the call ended. That was when Jackson was getting married. My name is Sophia. I have a father, a mother, and a younger brother named Jackson, 3 years my junior. Both Jackson and I chose colleges close to home to save money, so we lived with our parents. I went to a less prestigious college, while Jackson went to a top-ranked one. We continued to live at home even after graduation, choosing jobs nearby. But now, I'm unemployed. My recent company laid off about 100 employees, and I was one of them. I was in a good position in the company, so I never saw it coming. It's been about 2 months since I lost my job, but I have some savings. I'm taking my time looking for another job. Jackson, on the other hand, recently got engaged to his girlfriend and is living a charmed life. He's doing well. He earns a good salary, and he even gives money for rent and food to our mom. Mom once tried to refuse his money, saying, "You don't have to," but Jackson insisted. "Think of it as paying back for all you've done for me." He's such a good brother. We used to fight a lot when we were kids, but since middle school, he's been bigger and stronger, so we stopped fighting. In fact, He even looked up to me when I helped him with his studies. Well, now he's surpassed me in knowledge. As for Dad, he and Mom have been running a dessert shop for a long time. It doesn't make much, but Dad used to work for a big company, so they have a good amount of savings. Seeing our customers smile is what keeps me going, he says, working enthusiastically at the shop every day. One day, as the four of us were having dinner, Jackson said, "I'm thinking of getting married." The three of us stopped eating, and Mom was the first to speak. "Oh my, that's wonderful news! When can we expect a grandchild?" "Don't rush things, Mom, and remember, I get to hold the baby first. No objections allowed." Both were clearly thrilled. I was happy for Jackson's happiness too. A few months later, as the wedding preparations were in full swing, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered. "Hello? Is this the sister-in-law? I'm Lily, the one getting married to Jackson. Nice to meet you." Apparently, Jackson asked for my number and called me. I had seen her picture before, and she was stunning. I wondered where they met. "Nice to meet you. I'm Sophia, Jackson's sister. What can I do for you?" "I really don't want you at the wedding. Someone with your low education, willing to use illegal means to be popular with the opposite sex? I don't want to associate with you. I wish he'd cut ties with you. You're not fit to be his sister," she responded cryptically. "What do you mean by that?" Before I could answer, she hung up. What was that all about? Did I do something wrong? I pondered for about an hour but couldn't think of anything. And why would I? I had never met her before. Yet, she called out of the blue with such a strange request. Isn't it normal for all family members to attend a wedding? Or is this some new wedding trend I'm unaware of? I decided to wait for Jackson to return home and ask him about it. But Jackson didn't come home that day. Apparently, he had decided to live with his fiancée before the wedding to ensure a smooth start to their married life. When I told Mom about what Lily had said, both she and Dad were furious. "What is she thinking? A wedding without family? That's ridiculous." "Absolutely." I wasn't angry at the time. I wondered if I had unknowingly done something, or if Lily had been fed false information about me. But my parents' anger didn't subside, and they decided that none of our relatives would attend the wedding. So it seems that no one will go to Jackson's side. According to Jackson, Lily's family members all graduated from top-ranked universities and held prestigious jobs. She felt embarrassed that her fiancé's sister, me, didn't have a stable job and attended a lower-ranked college. Dad was livid. Discriminating based on education? Ridiculous! Jackson apologized to me later, but we never discussed that topic again. When I told Jackson everything Lily had said, he was shocked. What? What does she mean by illegal means? Sis, you didn't do anything like that, right? It seemed Jackson was hearing this for the first time. When I denied it, Jackson said he'd talked to Lily. A few days later, Jackson called. It seems that the truth has been revealed. Apparently, Lily had been suspicious because of the drastic difference between my high school and college photos. That should be it. I was quite chubby in high school. However, after entering university, I realized that I would no longer be popular. So I went on a strict diet and dropped my weight from 220 pounds to 150 pounds. But Lily couldn't believe it. She struggles to lose just 2 pounds, so she believes I must have used illegal means to drop 70 pounds? Given my lower education, she thinks it's plausible. Jackson tried to convince her. She just worked hard on her diet. But Lily wouldn't listen. Even worse, both Lily's father and mother believed her and insisted I shouldn't attend the wedding. I was so taken aback by this that I was at a loss for words. I decided, with my parents' agreement, not to attend the wedding. A few days later, Lily called again. "Sister-in-law, you're the worst! Because of what you told me, we were humiliated." "What? I didn't do anything. I just chose not to attend. I just didn't attend the wedding." The next day, Jackson called to apologize for Lily's behavior. You let Lily walk all over you, I warned. Jackson replied, I'm sorry, but I can't stand up to her. Apparently, one of Lily's relatives is a major client of Jackson's company. His career and future promotions hinge on staying in this person's good graces. If he upsets them, the business deal could be canceled, and Jackson could lose his job. I was more concerned about Jackson's situation and told him not to worry about it. A week later, Lily called again. I really didn't want to talk to her. Sister-in-law, you're unemployed, but you have a lot of savings, right? If I get pregnant, we want to live on the second floor. Could you move out? It'd be better for our baby. I don't want to say this, but being around someone who'd resort to such means to gain popularity is bad for the child's upbringing. Indeed, my parents live on the first floor and I have a room on the second. She wanted to use my room for their unborn child. Without hesitation, I declined. That's not possible. Goodbye. And I hung up. Although I haven't found a new job yet, I've been making money through Forex trading using my savings, and I contribute more to the household expenses than Jackson does. I was content living with my parents, and I had no plans to marry anytime soon. But I was worried that refusing Lily might affect Jackson's career. The next day, Dad was furious. Why did you refuse to live with them? It's just living together. I always dreamed of living with my grandchild. Are you trying to take that dream away from me? Dad's face is red and angry. I explained everything Lily had said. Dad calmed down. So, they want to kick you out and take over the second floor because you're bad for the baby's upbringing? Unbelievable. But if things continued this way, Jackson would always be under Lily's thumb. That's why Lily always calls me directly, not my mom. I told Mom, I'll move out. It should solve everything. Besides, they won't live here forever. Jackson always talked about living in a beautiful, spacious house. Dad was silent for a while, but then said, all right, and hung up. A few days later, I moved out to live on my own. Soon after, Jackson and Lily moved into my parents' house. Lily began preparing 2 rooms, one for their baby and another as their bedroom. Half a year passed. Mom called me. Since they moved in, they haven't paid any living expenses or rent. But I can't believe Jackson would do that. I think Lily might be stopping him. Why do you think that? Well, Lily doesn't cook at all, uses the bathroom whenever she wants, and keeps the heater on all winter. The electric bill is sky high. She keeps saying she's about to give birth, but her belly isn't getting any bigger. Apparently, Mom was doing all the housework, including cooking. The next day, I called Jackson. Jackson, how's living with Mom? It's fine. Lily seems to be getting along with Mom. I'm hardly home, but the laundry's always done and the room's clean. Make sure you thank Mom, okay? Thank her? She's doing everything. Laundry, cooking, cleaning. And I heard you're not even paying living expenses or rent. You should at least cover that. What? Lily told me she's doing everything. I give the rent to Lily every week. Are you saying she's not doing anything? It seemed Jackson was clueless. A few days later, Jackson invited everyone for dinner at their place. Mom made lots of pizza, my favorite. It seemed Lily was helping, but Mom told me she was just doing it reluctantly because her relatives and parents were coming. The doorbell rang. It was Lily's parents. As we all sat down, Mom said, I hope you enjoy the meal, even if it's nothing special. It all looks delicious, doesn't it, dear? Yes, it does. Lily's parents complimented the food, making Mom blush. Suddenly, Jackson raised his voice. Before we start eating, can I say something? He turned to Lily. You haven't been paying the rent I gave you to give Mom, have you? And what exactly have you been helping Mom with? What? Money? What are you talking about? Lily looked panicked, glancing at everyone. You told my sister to leave, didn't you? So we could move in. What were you thinking? I always thought Jackson was quiet and focused on his career, but this was different. He seemed serious. Lily, flustered, said, It's your family home. Why should we pay rent? It's not even a mansion, and I do the cleaning. The one actually cleaning is my mom. And where did the rent money I gave you go? Not just the rent, you didn't give her the living expenses either. What did you spend that money on? Turns out, Lily had been enjoying fancy French restaurants with that money. And she'd been treating her friends too. Lily's parents both turned red and apologized. They didn't know the real reason I didn't attend the wedding or why Lily was so keen on moving in. It's our fault for raising such a daughter. We're truly sorry. Then Jackson turned to Lily's mother and father. I'm considering a divorce. Please think about it. Lily burst into tears. Lily's mother pleaded, Please don't do that, I beg you, and deeply apologized to Jackson. My parents and I were shocked and looked at Jackson. But Jackson didn't stop. He turned to me and said, Sis, I'm truly sorry. We'll move out, so please come back here. I've been weak and let things slide, but I realize I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Jackson said this with tears in his eyes. You don't need to apologize, it's not your fault. But are you serious about the divorce? Jackson, with a serious look, replied, I am. Marrying her was a mistake from the start. She was overly concerned about educational backgrounds and even told you not to come to our wedding. She lied about expecting a baby, kicked you out to live in our family home, and pocketed the rent. Shame on her. Jackson shouted at Lily. Lily cried even louder. The food had gone cold. What a waste. We'll take our daughter and leave now. With her head down, Lily left with her parents. Lily's father pleaded with Jackson to reconsider, but Jackson firmly refused. In the end, Jackson divorced the following week. I could have moved back to my family home as Jackson suggested, but I didn't. Living alone had its perks. Instead, I urged Jackson to return, and he did. Fortunately, Jackson's career wasn't affected. In fact, he was asked to keep the matter private to avoid family embarrassment. 6 months later, Jackson left his job to start a new business using his expertise. I'll turn our family's dessert shop into a top-tier company. He was enthusiastic, but Dad seemed a bit puzzled, saying, It's fine the way it is now. As for me, I found a new job and a boyfriend. I plan to introduce him to my parents and Jackson soon. He's quite nervous. While marriage is still a ways off, I vowed to myself never to become a wife like Lily.
I can't believe you've been thinking about me this much. Thanks for forgiving me. With these words, my husband tightly grasped the hand of his affair partner right in front of me. As I watched the two of them basking in apparent joy, I secretly smirked. Enjoy your fleeting dream together. I can't wait to see their faces twist in shock. My name is Molly, 29 years old. I met Pat at a mixer, and we're now in our 4th year of marriage. Pat works in sales for a typical company, and when he returns home always varies. About 3 years ago, he started coming home in the early morning every Friday. I immediately suspected infidelity. He would always be gazing at his phone when at home, and sometimes a foolish grin would cross his face. He would hastily hide the screen when I walked behind him, and sometimes there was a scent of women's perfume. What are you looking at? You seem happy. I once asked him, testing the waters. Nah, the stocks I bought recently are doing well. I'll get a cake after work next time. What do you want? Such lies can't last for long. What confirmed the affair was a woman's earring that came out of Pat's pocket. When I confronted him, he immediately confessed. I will never do it again. It was just a momentary lapse of judgment. Please forgive me. Molly, you're the only one I love. At this point, 3 months had passed since I first began to suspect his infidelity. A momentary lapse for 3 months? I can't believe you even after hearing that. Let's get a divorce. I declared, but Pat clung to my leg. Night after night, he would go on about how much he regretted it, how much he thought about me, eventually shedding tears. Watching him, I sighed and decided to forgive him. I won't let you off next time. I gave him a stern warning, and we set some ground rules. Firstly, he must contact me whenever he's going to be late due to work. After work, he must return home directly, and if he wants to stop by somewhere, he needs my permission. It may seem controlling, but it's to prevent the same mistake from happening again. I set these conditions to alleviate at least some of my anxiety. If that's what it takes to be forgiven. Pat agreed without hesitation. I was hoping that with this, Pat would reform, and we could eventually become a loving couple again. After all, he was the person I decided to spend my life with at one point. Although the wounds from his betrayal hadn't fully healed, I held on to hope for the future and decided to continue my relationship with Pat. However, even if he says such apologies, he's still a man who was intimate with another woman behind my back. Thinking about it just filled me with disgust. For a while, I decided to sleep in a separate bedroom from Pat. Half a year has passed since Pat's infidelity was discovered. He was diligently following the agreed conditions, but lately it seems like Pat is taking the agreement lightly. Why didn't you let me know you'd be late? We agreed you would tell me when you'd be late, remember? I questioned him when he arrived home at dawn. Pat let out an exaggerated sigh and retorted, "Do you really expect me to inform you every single time? Sometimes the conversation gets interesting, and before you know it, time has flown. How much control over me do you need? We're a couple. Shouldn't you trust me a bit more?" Honestly, who does he think he is, saying something like that? He was the one who caused all of this. Have you forgotten what you did? You were the one who agreed to these conditions, weren't you? If you can't stick to them, you're breaking the rules, right? If you can't keep your promises, I'll have to reconsider our relationship. Upon hearing this, Pat, who had been looking down on me with such confidence, suddenly looked uneasy. Reconsider? What do you mean? I mean considering separation or divorce. After all, while I forgave your cheating, I haven't fully trusted you since. If you betray my trust again, I'll consider separation or divorce. At that, Pat clung to my leg, just like the first time, apologizing. I'm sorry, I'll keep you informed. I can't live without you, Molly. Please, don't say such things. If that's what you think, prove it with your actions. I replied coldly and headed to my bedroom. Since then, Pat has been diligent about keeping me informed. While he often comes home late, it seems he has made a good impression on his clients and gets invited to their drinking parties quite often. I have another drinking party today. We're close to sealing a deal. You go ahead and sleep. Reading the message from Pat, I let out a sigh. Maybe if he's going to be late, I should take a detour on my way home. I'm curious about some new cosmetics, and it could be a good diversion. It had been a while, but I decided to go to the department store after work. On my way to the department store, I happened to spot Pat. He was walking arm in arm with a woman, looking quite comfortable. That woman, there's no mistaking it, she was the woman Pat cheated on me with. When I confronted him about his affair 6 months ago, I had him delete all her photos. And there she was, standing next to Pat. He had been talking about his clients and contracts so seriously, and yet here he was, cheating again. What was all that effort for? If he likes other women so much, he might as well just go be with them. My emotions were all mixed up, my body shaking uncontrollably. I need evidence. Next thing I knew, I was taking pictures of my husband's infidelity with my smartphone. I lost any desire to shop and decided to go straight home. The next day, Pat came home in the morning as if nothing had happened. I got carried away talking with clients last night. We were drinking till just now. Listening to their stories is exhausting. I'm gonna take a shower and lie down. I see. He had been out having a good time till morning. Of course he must be tired. From the bathroom, I could hear his cheerful humming. As I listened, my anger, which had been building up, reached its peak. Thinking he could live as he always had, betraying me twice? I will make this utterly selfish husband understand. A week later, as soon as he got home, Pat approached me.
Hey, are you okay today?
Absolutely not. Don't touch me. When I pushed his hand away from my waist, Pat distorted his face in a split second.
Enough already. Do you have any idea how much I'm holding back?
He hit my cheek with the hand I had just pushed away. Unbelievable. He was not only cheating, but also getting violent. I shouldn't have forgiven him back then. Overwhelmed with regret, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. But now is not the time to cry. In my pocket, a voice recorder that would serve as evidence was running. You're not holding back at all. If you want to do it so badly, why don't you do as much as you want with your mistress? When I shouted like that, Pat's eyes widened in surprise. You think I haven't noticed? I know everything.
What? What are you talking about?
Your favorite Anna should be arriving soon. At the same time, the house's doorbell rang. Pat's face turned pale at the sudden appearance of his mistress. In fact, I had been in contact with Anna during the week. The moment she learned I was Pat's wife, she grimaced as if annoyed, but she immediately smiled when I said, I'm going to divorce him. I thought you would hold on longer, but you're surprisingly easygoing, huh? Let's sit down and talk, the three of us. That's how it happened, and I had told Anna to come here at this time today. As soon as Anna appeared, she said, We can finally be together, and quickly wrapped her arm around Pat's.
Hey!
It's okay, your wife knows already, and we finally agreed, so it's fine.
Everything is set?
That's right. I interrupted the two's conversation. I can't be with you anymore. Anna will be the one to support you from now on. Lucky you. He had a complex look on his face and was alternating his glances between me and Anna as he said,
But, are you sure? But you...
It's not about what's good or not. This is the best way for everyone to be happy. Pat seemed to be hesitating for a while at my words, but he seemed to have made up his mind as he nodded strongly.
So you were thinking about me all this time. Thank you, Molly. I'll live with Anna. Thank you for understanding.
Whether he misunderstood something, he took Anna's hand and squeezed it strongly. The two of them were so engrossed in their own world, it was as if they had forgotten I was there. Looking at their happy faces, I felt contempt anew. But their smiles would distort soon. Thinking about it, I couldn't help but grin. It's a shame that I won't be able to see what happens to these two from now on. I should have planted a camera. Well, I do have a voice recorder to record their conversations. I handed Pat the divorce papers, made him sign and put a seal on it, and packed up my small items. The movers will come for the rest of the stuff tomorrow, so see ya! With that, I said goodbye to the house I had lived in for 4 years. It was such an anticlimactic ending. 2 weeks later, a call came in. It was Pat. The time had finally come. I picked up the phone with a grin. Hello?
Hello, Molly. A person claiming to be your lawyer just came by. What's going on? You said you were forgiving me, right? I didn't hear anything about alimony.
That's right. Right after divorcing Pat, I had visited a law firm. I took pictures of the affair I had been recording when I called Anna to the house, and of course, the moment Pat laid his hand on me was also recorded. There was plenty of evidence, so I was able to get a notarized statement immediately. Still, I felt uneasy with just a notarized statement, so I asked the lawyer to visit him directly. I already received a report from the lawyer, so I was eagerly waiting for a call from Pat.
I can't afford to pay alimony. This is out of the blue.
I could tell how flustered he was, even over the phone, but I calmly replied, I never said I would forgive you, did I? It's pretty obvious you'd be asked to pay alimony after having an affair, don't you think? Plus, you raised a hand to me.
What? Wait a minute. Yes, I shouldn't have hit you in the heat of the moment, but things were settled between you and Anna, right? Isn't that why you called Anna to the house?
Pat began to talk rapidly. I watched him, ridiculous as he was, and told him with a triumphant tone. I continued, How dare you cheat on me behind my back and still think you can walk away unscathed? Do you think things are settled between Anna and me? What gave you that impression? How about you stop conveniently interpreting things in your favor?
Let's talk about this, Molly.
I forgave you once for your infidelity, but there won't be a second time. I was certain that even he, in his foolishness, would understand the gravity of the situation now. But contrary to my expectations, Pat exploded.
You've got to be kidding me. If I knew it would come to this, I would never have chosen Anna. You deceived me.
How many times does this man need to disappoint me before he's satisfied? As I stood in disbelief, unable to respond, I heard Anna's voice coming from the other end of the phone. What do you mean by that? Didn't you want to be with me? You told me I can't be with you because my wife won't divorce me. You deceived me too. Apparently, things were getting heated on the other end of the line. It's a shame I couldn't witness it in person. I don't have the money to pay compensation. You should pay it.
I don't have that kind of money either. Pay your own share.
You're the reason we're in this mess. You should apologize.
No, you should apologize.
Their argument continued like this until Pat finally shouted at Anna.
Just shut up. Right now, I'm talking to Molly.
Then, lowering his voice, Pat made an unbelievable proposal.
I'll break up with Anna. Let's start over, Molly. I realized it's you whom I truly love. I can't live without you, Molly. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. Let's start over.
The nerve of him to say something so self-serving. I can't believe I wasted 6 months of my life showing leniency to such a fool. With all the volume I could muster, I yelled at Pat. Listen here, if your apology solved everything, we wouldn't need lawyers. Start over with you? The very thought makes me want to vomit. Whether you break up with her or not is irrelevant to me. I don't have the slightest intention of getting back together with you, and I absolutely will not cancel the compensation claim. Don't you dare contact me ever again.
Wait, please. Molly, Molly.
He kept calling out my name, but I simply hung up the phone. Several calls came in from him after that, but I ignored them all. Meanwhile, I found that the compensation of $35,000 and $15,000, a total of $50,000, had been deposited into my account. According to my lawyer, Pat and Anna got into serious trouble and even ended up involving the police. They both insisted that they were the victims and were only telling lies to protect themselves, leaving the police at a loss. In the end, they paid me the compensation, but it seems they're both trying to get the money back from each other, even going as far as filing lawsuits against one another. A man who cheats on his wife without a second thought, and a woman who willingly gets involved with a married man. A fitting end indeed. As for me, I took this opportunity to quit my job and move to a quieter place in the Vermont countryside, which I had been eyeing for a while. I think I'll take it easy, away from the hustle and bustle of the city for a while.